actually this evening, there's a commemoration of the end of Peter and Paul's journey. There's a commemoration of their martyrdoms, right? Of the story that God is telling us, that God is revealing in each of them. And there's such different apostles. Right? One was a fisherman. The other, as he says of himself, he was a Pharisee among Pharisees. He was the most strict of the Jews. He was a great man of letters. People often don't recognize that or realize that St. Paul, though he was a tent maker, was also a tremendously educated man. He knew the philosophy, he knew the culture. He was able to speak across many different cultures and levels. And Peter, he was certainly a formed Jew, but he was a fisherman. And they even butted heads a number of times. And Paul was to go to the Gentiles, and Peter stayed with the Jews in their evangelization and so on. But in each of them, we see God working magnificently. And what we see, I think, in particular, what I want to just touch on this evening, especially as it applies to each of our lives and as it applies to the fraternity of St. Peter, we see God coming to each of these men just as they needed. Right? Paul was persecuting the church when he was known as Saul. Right? He was a man full of zeal for God, but he was confused. And how did our Lord come to him? He knocks him off his horse. He blinds him. And then he sends him out to Paul says he spent 3 years in Arabia before he came back to the apostles. What happened in that time? It seems he was in a desert place and being educated somehow by our Lord and the Holy Ghost. And he comes back and he's, as he says himself modestly, says that he was one less wise, but he has to defend his apostleship. And he says, I've done more work than all the apostles, and he's right. There's no question. And then there's Peter. And we see it so beautifully, especially at the end of St. John's Gospel, when Peter has denied our Lord 3 times, and our Lord is risen, and they're waiting for the coming of the Holy Ghost. And Peter says, as typical of Peter, as so beautiful as Peter, right? Grace builds on nature, doesn't destroy it. Peter's a fisherman. He says, I'm going fishing. And, well, the other fishermen, John and James, say, we're coming too. And they fish all night, and they catch nothing. And then from the shore they hear a voice saying, do you catch anything, children? He says, cast your nets on the other side. And then they can't even pull in the nets, there's so many fish. Right? This happened once before. When Peter first encountered our Lord. And Peter fell at our Lord's feet and said, depart from me, I am a sinful man. And our Lord replays that scene for him now at the end, now after his betrayal. And St. John recognizes that it's our Lord, of course, the contemplative. He sees first. And Peter, of course, being Peter, what does he do? He dives into the water. He can't even wait for the boat to get to shore. And when he finds our Lord there, our Lord does not rebuke him. Our Lord meets Peter where he is at. I think I mentioned this the last time I was here. St. John tells us that on the shore there was a fire of coals. There were fish and bread there on the coals. The last time we were told there were a fire of coals, it was the fire that the servants and Peter were warming themselves at when Peter denied our Lord during his trial. Peter certainly understood this. But our Lord doesn't rebuke him. He doesn't say, Peter, you failed me. Peter, I'm going to build a church on you, but you betrayed me. He takes Peter where he's at. Peter, no doubt, feels the sting of those 3 betrayals. He says to Peter, Peter, do you love me more than these? It's so beautiful. The Greek word they use, I forgot what he said. You love me with an unconditional love. And Peter says, Lord, you know I love you. But the word that he uses to love is philia, is friendship. Lord, you know I'm your friend. Then our Lord asks him a second time, Peter, do you love me? You have that unconditional love for me, that honor. Peter says, Lord, Philia. You know you are my friend. And the Lord asks the third time, 3 denials, now there are going to be 3 affirmations. He says, Peter, do you love me? And it's our Lord who changes the word. He comes down to Peter. He says, Peter, you love me with Philia. Peter, are you my friend? He sees where Peter is and he meets him there. Of course, Peter is hurt, but it's a healing hurt. St. John tells us that Peter is hurt because our Lord asks him the third time. This is healing that wound of betrayal. Peter says, Lord, you know all things. You know I love you. And now Peter uses the word father. You know I love you unconditionally. How magnificently our Lord deals with each of us. How magnificently he comes to each of us as each of us need. Now sometimes that's certainly hurt because sometimes that's exactly what we need. And then the Lord says, and each time he says, with each affirmation, he says, feed my lambs. Feed my lambs. And the last one, not just lambs. Feed my sheep. And then he says, Peter, follow me. And it's so magnificent. Peter looks around and he sees St. John, of course, the beloved disciple, already following our Lord. And he says, what about this one? This one is already following you. But our Lord says so beautifully. He says, if I should want him to stay alive until I come the second time, what is it to you, Peter? Follow me. Before our Francisco goes, I'm going to say, Peter, I'm telling your story. I'm talking to you, I'm not talking to John. There's no generic story with our Lord. He's dealing with each of us as each of us need. He comes to us where we are at. He doesn't come to us as a group. And I just say this also in terms of the fraternity sacred here. It has been upon me a number of years, and it may get a whole lot more upon me. And the Lord will not abandon us. I don't know what He has in store for us as a community, for each of us, grace for me. But I do know that He will meet each of us, and He will meet our community exactly where we need to be met. He will speak to us those words that we need to hear. He will allow those things to happen to us that need to happen to us. And it may be quite difficult. In fact, our Lord ends his discourse with Peter saying, Peter, up to this point, you have hurted yourself and you have led yourself where you want to go. But soon, somebody else will hurt you. They will blind you. And they will lead you where you do not want to go. And St. John tells us that our Lord told him this to reveal to him the death that he would die to glorify our Savior. In fact, there's a beautiful story. There's a chapel just outside of Rome. It's called the Full Bodies Chapel. And the story is that when the persecution got really bad in Rome, the believers said, Peter, you've got to get out of here. He's the Holy Father. He's the Pope. We've got to save our leader. Peter, you've got to leave before they get you. And he listened to them. And on the outskirts of Rome, he saw a Lord going into Rome. And Peter said, Lord, where are you going? And our Lord said, I'm going to be crucified there for you again. Peter got the message. He went back into Rome. And he was crucified. Only when they brought out the cross, he said, I'm not worthy to be crucified as my Lord. And so they hung the cross upside down. How magnificent. How patient. How lovingly our Lord is. How gentle. How wise in the way that He meets each one of us. Let us take these lessons to heart, especially on this magnificent feast day. God has not abandoned us. He knows what He's doing. And yes, it may hurt. We too may have to be crucified upside down. But our with